Today we're going to review the art principles. The art principles are the way that we organize the art elements. And this is how we create works of art, by manipulating the art elements to create artwork through these art principles. Our first art principle is contrast. Contrast is generally opposites. Here we see several opposites. We have black and white as the most obvious one, but you can also have clear versus blurry, or front versus back. Those are a few opposites we can see in that image. How about this one of out in the desert? We can see near versus far, up versus down, rough versus smooth textures, bright colors versus dark colors. In this city scene, we can see tall versus short, vertical versus horizontal, fluffy organic clouds versus sharp building edges. We have some opposites there. In this desert scene, we can see the dry sand versus the wet water of the oasis. We can see flat areas versus mountainous looking areas with the dunes. Anything that you can show as an opposite is going to show contrast. Our next art principle is unity. Unity is a way to hold things together, kind of like a team. And you'll notice that teams are often unified by their uniform, and that's where the word comes from. But we can unify things in art in other ways too. We can unify by color like in the team, but also through the color that we see in a photograph here of the desert. These are unified by this overall sandy color or this pink-like hue. We can also say it's unified because these objects, these pyramids, are overlapping each other, so that's unified as well. We can see this scene of balloons being unified because of the color, but also because of the shape. This balloon shape is repeated all over the place, which helps unify the picture. This scene is unified because it's all taking place in one space. Everything is underwater, so it's unified. Or we can say the blue is touching all of the objects within the image. So these are different ways that we can show unity in a work of art. Our next art principle is balance. An obvious kind of balance we call symmetry, where one side is exactly the same as the other, almost like a mirror. But we can have something else called asymmetry, where you have one object balanced by another that are not the same, but carry the same amount of visual weight or visual mass. You can also balance things by having an all-over pattern. Here's an organic pattern of branches of a tree. Because it's all over the place, it automatically brings balance to the image. If you put something in the middle of an image, then it also balances it automatically because it's put in the center. If you notice, the face too has symmetry in it, so that's another kind of balance. Emphasis is our next art principle. And emphasis is about making one thing stand out over all of the rest. Here we have a red cube standing out against these turquoise spheres. Even the background and foreground is kind of a cool color, but this is a warm color, so it stands out as different from the rest. So it is emphasized or almost highlighted, and highlighting is another way that you can emphasize with color. But we can also emphasize with lines. Here, all the lines and shadows go to this fellow in the middle. So he is emphasized in the image. He stands out as important. Another way that people can be emphasized is everyone's looking in one direction and we have one person over here. So because all the people are looking in a crowd, we don't notice any particular individual here, but we do notice this person over here, this soldier. So we say that he is emphasized above the rest. In this image, we have this person being emphasized because they're different, they're organic, and all of these other lines are very mechanical and look like they could have been drawn or created with a ruler. Because all of these are very angular and straight, and this one has kind of natural edges, it stands out as different, so it is emphasized. Our next art principle is variety. Variety is showing 3 or more differences. And here we have a variety of colors: orange, green, yellow, red, tan, and purple. We also have a variety of vegetables: tomatoes, peppers, onions, and ginger maybe back there. We can have a variety of colors here in these roses, showing almost a full spectrum of color. So we can say, because there are more than 3 different colors, that it has a variety of colors. If it was only 2, it might be contrast, but because there are 3 or more, we have to say it's variety. This image looks kind of unified because it's all water, but if we look carefully, we can see that the direction of the water is different in all these different areas. So we would say there are a variety of differences. This wave is coming down, this wave is going up, this wave is curling forward. So we have all of these differences in the textures of the water to create variety. This is an unusual house by an architect, and we see a variety of forms. We have a sphere, a pyramid, a cube, and triangles. We have flat lines. This shape is a rectangle. So we have a variety of shapes in this particular building. Remember that variety is 3 or more differences. Movement is our next art principle, and we can have the regular old movement of a person, and because this is blurred a little bit, we get that sense of movement in the picture, even though we know it's not actually moving. But movement can be implied. Here we have an unusual picture of some water flowing. Because the lines are all going in one direction with this little swoop, we get the idea of movement. Here we can talk about the movement of this waterfall going down and forward to us. So we can speak about those things moving. But we can also be moving as we look at it. Our eyes go from the foreground up to the middle ground and down to the background. We can see that even more obviously in this image by Ansel Adams, where our eye flows up the river and then in front of the mountains and then hits this bright area. So the movement can be in the image, like here, but sometimes the movement is us looking through the image, creating another sense of movement from foreground, middle ground to background. The next art principle is pattern. And there are going to be 2 main different kinds of pattern. There are regular and predictable patterns like these bricks. And then we have unpredictable patterns like these leaves. These would be mechanical patterns versus organic patterns. We can see both in this image. In buildings, you'll see a lot of mechanical patterns. We have these arches repeating, these columns repeating, these windows repeating at regular intervals. But if we look at the stars in the sky, we can see a pattern as well, but it's an unpredictable pattern. Sometimes you can even have both in the same object. Here we have these unusual balconies in architecture. They're going at all sorts of different angles, but it is creating a pattern. It's an organic pattern of mechanical objects. Isn't that kind of weird? The interesting thing too about pattern is that the smallest piece of a repeating pattern is called the motif. The motif here are these bricks that are repeating. Or you can have an organic motif of leaves repeating in the background. Some teachers like to talk about another art principle called proportion. And proportion is really a combination of contrast and unity a lot of times, but proportion can also be talking about the proportions of the human body or the proportions of the human face. Proportions can be similar, as in these people standing in line to go to work, or proportions can change from foreground to background, going from large to small, and giving us that sense of movement. Proportions can also add visual drama to an image. We have a mountain in the background, which we know is huge, and then this leaf in the foreground to create this visual drama. So some teachers will talk about proportion as another art principle. A fun way to remember the art principles is this acronym, CubeVamp. Contrast, unity, balance, emphasis, variety, and movement with pattern. When we look at works of art, we can see all of the art principles in them. Some will be more obvious, and some will be harder to see. For this picture by Van Gogh, Starry Night, we can see contrast. We have bright areas and dark areas. We have up and vertical versus horizontal. We have yellow and orange contrasting blue and purple. We can talk about unity, how all of the brushstrokes are short and line-like. We have this sense of flow through the image, like water, so that creates a sense of unity. There's the overall use of blue in the image, which creates unity. When we look at balance, you might think it's not balanced because it's not like a mirror where one side is exactly like the other. But remember, we have something called asymmetry. This is asymmetrically balanced. This large tree on the left is balanced by the mountains and the town on the right. Then we have emphasis. Some people feel that the moon is emphasized because it is the largest and brightest thing in the sky. Other people tend to think that this yin-yang symbol in the center seems to be this place of emphasis because it's in the center and it kind of draws your eye in. Then we have variety. There's a variety of stars in the sky. There's a variety of colors used throughout the image. We have a variety of brush strokes. Some are short and some are long. And we have a variety of subjects from sky, mountain, town, tree, moon, and stars. Our last art principle would be pattern, and this has a lot of organic pattern to it. There's an organic pattern of stars in the sky. There is this swooping pattern of mountains and hills in the back. They almost look like waves. Then there is this pattern of lights in the windows of the town that's also organic and unpredictable. So all of the art principles can be said to be seen in this one image.